Well, hey, good afternoon or morning, whenever you're watching this. My name is Mark. I'm the lead pastor of Rethink Church here in Maryville, Indiana. And we have a special guest. We refer to Tom Cochran as Uncle Tom for Rethink Church, because here's the reality of it. Without Tom and Sarah Cochran, I'm not sure if Rethink Church exists. And so they were the first ones to kind of introduce us to the area of Maryville. Like, we drove in here, we looked around, and immediately I just felt like God was saying, this is where you start your church. And so without that connection, I'm not sure we exist. But so we refer to Tom as Uncle Tom here at Rethink Church. And so, Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you're living now, and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, so it's a joy to be with you guys. Love Rethink, and for me, I grew up in Indiana. Grew up center of the state around Kokomo area. Moved to Northwest Indiana for a couple of years to pastor a church there before taking the role that I'm currently in at Destiny Rescue. So my wife and I have been in pastoral ministry for almost 20 years and now live in Florida. So we're about an hour outside of Orlando. We're opening the Southeast U.S. office for Destiny Rescue. So what that means is that we're partnering with churches, individuals, and businesses in the Southeast U.S. To help them be able to bring rescue and restoration to kids around the world trapped in the commercial sex industry. That's what Destiny Rescue does. Our agents are mobilized by individuals to go, donors and partners to go out and to go into some of the darkest places and find kids that are trapped and exploited and bring rescue. And then our aftercare team connects with them and shepherds them, walks with them through a process of healing and assessment. Every child's different, so their aftercare is different, as we say. So some kids may need medical care, some kids may need education, some job skill training. So we assess what their needs are and help them step into their preferred future and destiny, so they could be healthy and whole adults and not have to carry around the scars and the pain and trauma of their traumatic situations.
Yeah. So living in Florida, you avoided the mid-April snow that we just got the other day. So enjoy that.
Yeah, it's blistering at 85 degrees, and yeah, in the evening I'm sitting out by the pool and kind of just relaxing. It's the great thing about quarantining at a place that has a pool in the backyard. Yeah. So I realized that I have it a little easier than most during this time.
Well, that's a good thing. So rub it in everyone's faces, because that's what you should do.
Yes, right? Yes.
But so when this whole COVID-19 coronavirus thing hit, what were you guys doing and what were you in the midst of?
Yeah, so Sarah and I were on tour with Winter Jam. Winter Jam is the largest Christian concert tour in the world. So we had 43 days. We went to 43 cities. And the whole night is just a night of great music. It's an opportunity to hear the good news of Jesus and just to have a celebration, a little bit of a party. So part of what we did is I got to speak from the main stage. Sarah was connecting to anybody who went into our booth and wanted more information. Had some great conversations. Had another teammate with us that also presented from the stage. We would kind of tag team. But we had 13 dates left when COVID broke out. And so when COVID-19 broke out, that's where all organizations and places started closing. So all the places that we were going to for tour closed to the tour. So we found ourselves back in Nashville, and within about 72 hours found ourselves jumping on a flight with all of our bags and landing back here in Florida. And the tour was canceled. And, so we started adjusting to life in quarantine. And, it was a great opportunity to help spread the hope of rescue, and to just connect with people, to meet new people and folks who would want to be involved and want to use their voice to help rescue kids.
Yeah. So a little disappointing, but at the same time, just kind of a great season of fulfillment and seeing what God was doing in the midst of it, right?
Absolutely. And we got to see the church come alive and got to have a better appreciation for what the people of God can be motivated to do and the impact that they can give. We saw over 30,000 people put their trust in Jesus. Wow. There was another organization there with us called Hope that was doing child sponsorship and adoption. There were, I believe, over 4,000 kids that were sponsored. The mission of Winter Jam has been rescue in a lot of different forms. So to partner with them and to use their stage to help kids be free from sexual exploitation, it's an incredible opportunity, incredible relationship.
That's awesome. So with this whole COVID-19 thing, I can't imagine that Destiny Rescue is putting pause and saying, well, we'll just get back to rescuing kids when this whole thing lifts. So how are you guys doing this now, and what does it look like a little bit different in this season?
Yeah, so rescue is relentless. It doesn't stop. Trafficking and exploitation doesn't stop. In fact, it's only ramping up because now we have more people who are vulnerable. And with vulnerability, that's where traffickers will come in and take advantage and prey upon people. So what we've seen is our team out, surveying places that we would normally go rescue kids in bars and brothels and places like that. Those places are typically closed, but we still check those places because we did find one that was still operating. It just looked like it was closed, and we were able to rescue a young girl out of that. We also are being creative in our rescue. So we just had our first cyber rescue a few weeks ago. A 2.5-year-old boy was being trafficked by his mom and his stepdad. So we were able to rescue him, and so we're leaning into new ways to rescue and really finding where kids are and where they're being trafficked, and bringing light to those dark situations and circumstances. So we've been able to see that still, even when it's ramping up, we're just having to figure out better ways. So that's one way that folks can be praying for us, as we would continue to find better ways and find where kids are, but we're still pushing the envelope and trying to figure out ways to see kids set free.
Yeah. So when you say the term trafficked, explain that on elementary level. It's not a good thing, right? Obviously.
It's not a good thing. There's typically two ways to look at it. There's sexual exploitation. So that's taking advantage of somebody for profit. And then there's trafficking, which is moving people around. So both are in the work that we do, but there's a lot of times where we rescue kids who are being sexually exploited. So they're being taken advantage of sexually. There are other times where we know that kids are being moved. So we rescue on the border of a country where traffickers will connect with kids via social media and promise them jobs or marriage or a better life. And they bring them across the border and then move them to another city where they're going to be sold into slavery. So that's trafficking. Exploitation is taking advantage of somebody who's vulnerable. So in some of the countries that we work, kids are in poverty and they have to go find a job to be able to help sustain their family. So they go into the community to look for a job. And when they're looking for a job, somebody lies to them, tricks and traps them, tells them they're going to be working at a restaurant or in a different venue. And all of a sudden, it's not what they were told. It's something else. And they're now being taken advantage of sexually. And those folks are making profit off of them.
Gotcha. Yeah. And in this season and in other seasons, who are the most vulnerable throughout the world? And then let's narrow down and say, let's say like in America, who's the most vulnerable?
Yeah. So, I mean, internationally around the world, number one, the most vulnerable person is those who are in poverty. Those who are, if say you have to move from one country to another because of persecution, or your family's looking to better themselves and you're just in dire straits and you have to go find work, you have to go find a living to be able to put food on the table, because in a lot of countries, there's not the margin like we have. We spend extra money on streaming and things like that. There isn't that extra margin. So they have to decide, do we put food on the table or not? So the most vulnerable there are those who are in poverty, those who lack education, who may be unaware, so they're coming in from, say, maybe a village outside of a major city, and they're not fully aware of what could happen. So because there's some naivety, folks are preying on them and taking advantage of them. In the U.S., the same thing applies. I mean, you look at folks who have, there's struggles with education, there's struggles with poverty, lower income. The number one person at risk in the U.S. for exploitation and trafficking is kids in the foster care system, because they're vulnerable. Everything that they know has been upended. and they're looking for meaning. They're looking for somebody to care for them and to provide safety.
Yeah.
And so there's in the midst of that, and following that, then you look at our teenagers, our students, our kids who are growing up, and maybe there's challenges at home. So because of the challenges at home, and they're looking for a safe person to talk to or to share. They're looking for somebody just to kind of vent to. Culture says you can just put anything on social media right now.
Yeah.
So because of that, you see kids being exploited and taken advantage of quite a bit in the U.S.
Yeah. And so as parents, like parents and community leaders, what can we actually do to help protect the vulnerable? Because I think it's one of the roles as a Christian, as a follower of Christ, to protect the most vulnerable. And so what would you suggest that some of our roles should look like in that?
So the best thing that I would tell you, Mark, is to add value and dignity to people. If you look at how Jesus interacted with people, that's what he did in his time on earth. Particularly, you go to John chapter 4 and you look at the story of the woman at the well. This lady is coming to the well to gather water. She is alone. Typically, this was happen. They would gather water all together as a community. This was a communal exercise because they would interact with one another and share the latest stories and news and gossip and all that. She's coming together at the heat of the day, which you never do gather water at the heat of the day. It's heavy work. You got to carry that big water jug. Jesus is sitting there and he just asks her a question. The number one thing that we can do is ask questions and have conversation. If you see something's out of place, we all know that moment when we go, there's something not right.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you don't have to see a ton of things to just go, something not right. So you lean in and have a conversation. One of the best things that I would tell people to do when it comes to reporting trafficking or things that they may think about is trafficking in the U.S. or exploitation is to call the National Trafficking Hotline or to simply just dial 911 and to report it. If you see something, say something. It's being involved in your local high school, middle school, elementary school as a mentor. It's boys and girls clubs. It's foster parenting. Those are the things that would, from a major impact to help those kids who are vulnerable. Those are the ways that you can give your time. It's value adding. It's truly seeing people. It's getting them in the midst of their lives and trying to understand and where they're at, and just to love them and to care for them and to be a safe person.
Yeah.
And to then have those conversations. As a parent, one of the best ways to protect your kids is to know what happens on these devices.
Yeah.
Know what happens on your computer. My wife and I are the parents of a 20-year-old, and when he was in high school and middle school, we knew where he was. We knew where he was going online. We knew how. We quickly became, tech experts on how to search for histories and know what they were looking at. And so there's lots of ways that you can protect your kids. But to engage in a community where there are vulnerable kids is a critical thing. Being aware of people. I think so many times we get so caught up in what's going on in our situation, in our lives, that we don't pay attention to our neighbor. I think that's one of the things that has shifted because of COVID-19 is we're now becoming more and more aware of our neighbors. Just reaching out and saying, "Oh, those cute people," to encounter them.
Yeah. Sorry, you just went out a little bit. Can you repeat that last part?
Yeah. So so it's just being able to pause and to see people and to engage them, and to know that each person's different. So how you engage one person may not work for somebody else. You have to actually get to know the person and get to hear their story and care for them based on how they best receive it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In a previous conversation, when we were talking about just setting this up, you mentioned some statistics about when kids are out of school and what they're watching online. Can you share some of that and give us some insight on that?
Yeah. So I recently read a statistic that it was from cpyu.org that talked about the fact that there is about a 5,000% increase in pornography viewing when kids are out of school.
Hmm.
So the reality is that, I mean, we're all home, we're all on devices.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but we have our nephews and niece are with us for a little bit, and they're doing online school, and my wife and I are trying to do Zoom meetings, and others are using the internet, and the bandwidth just goes quick.
Yeah.
So we're constantly on devices, and the reality is that before COVID-19, over $3,000 a day was spent on pornography. The reality is that over 93% of males before the age of 18 view pornography for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Teen is in the top 10 list of words searched on Pornhub. And the reality is that when it comes to pornography, we never know what happens on the other side of the camera.
Yeah.
We never know the age of the person who's truly in the video or the pictures we're looking at. The reality is that this is one of the places where people are tracked and exploited constantly. And so even in looking at pornography, I mean, there's all the realities of what it does to us. I
Right.
mean, you could protectyoungeyes.com or others. You can look at even the most secular sources talk about the negative impacts of pornography on our minds, on our brains, how our synapses and different things are formed, the realities of what it does to marriage. But when kids start to look at it, it's also helping them understand that this is fueling exploitation. This is fueling the reality that pornography generates over $4.9 billion. That pornography gets more views than Amazon, Netflix, and Hulu combined.
Yeah, that's insane.
It is, and it's at our fingertips. It's on every device. And when you're talking to your kids, some of these sites, folks will ask your kids to send them videos of themselves or pictures, things like that. And this is just me talking as a pastor, as a dad.
Yeah.
Because Destiny Rescue, our expertise is rescuing kids internationally. But for 20 years of experience and as a dad, I had to have conversations with my son to help him understand, like, the things that you send people are always out there. And once you send, you have no control over where that goes.
Yeah.
So that gets circulated around school. That could get circulated on some of these sites. There are countless stories of people who innocently enough sent a video of themselves to somebody or something, and it ended up on one of these sites.
Mm-hmm.
So just as a protection. Yeah. Say that again.
So then you have that shame and that embarrassment you're walking around with.
Exactly.
Not let alone anything else that's criminal, those kind of things.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And I mean, most teens, and honestly, our teens aren't, unless you have a really good relationship with your kid, they're not going to want to have that conversation with you of, hey, I accidentally did this. So it's beneficial to help your kids understand that you're not going to overreact to something, that you're going to have a conversation. And yes, there may be consequences, but your role as a parent is to love them, protect them,
mm-hmm.
make sure that they're okay. So having those conversations with them about the realities of everything holistically helps them really kind of understand that some of the things that they're doing right now has a direct impact to what happens internationally even.
Yeah. So would you say watching porn and engaging that just only exploits other people that you guys are trying to rescue around the world? Right.
And knowing the fact that the word teen is one of the top 10 words searched for pornography, for internet pornography. I mean, that right there is just enough to tell us, like, we have to engage this. And there's the supply and demand as well. As long as there's demand, there's going to be supply.
Yeah.
And so if we can take away the supply and begin to address it, it works itself backwards to help take care of the demand piece as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yeah.
As an organization, Destiny Rescue, our hope is that we end child sexual slavery in our lifetime, and we
Yeah.
have a lot of work to do. And so it's going to take all of us making an impact and making a difference in our circle of influence to be able to bring rescue.
Right. So if somebody wants to find out more information about Destiny's Rescue, where could we find that information? Or even you and Sarah, where could we find more information about you guys as well?
Yeah, so destinyrescue.org is our website. I'll make sure that I kick Mark my contact information so it can be put in the show notes or sent out to anybody who's interested. But Tom.Cochran at destinyrescue.org is my email address. Would love to have conversations. If you personally want to get involved or if you want to raise up an army of advocates, or if there's anything I can do to support and encourage, I'd love to do that for you.
Awesome.
And I'm grateful for Rethink and for you guys' partnership. Because of you guys, there's kids around the world that are being rescued and set free. So I just honor you guys and love what you guys do. Love how you love your community as well and make an impact, because this happens in every country around the world, in every community. Exploitation and trafficking is happening. We just maybe don't see it for what it is, and maybe just not aware of it. So as you begin to see people, you begin to open up to these possibilities and realities. And hopefully, as Christ followers, as God followers, our heart becomes more and more attuned to this idea of adding value and bringing hope. And as we do that, we get to see in destinies change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And I'd love to send people your way and, get more people involved and raise up an army here. So
awesome. Absolutely, man. Thanks so much, bro.
Thank you.
Yeah.